Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got Drew Hanlen with me. Drew, what's going on, my man?
Man, nothing. Just getting ready for workouts today. It's early West Coast time, so appreciate you having me on early and being flexible with your schedule.
Absolutely, man. It's persistence, man. You're traveling all over the country and helping all these guys, and but I wanted to have you on the podcast because it's fun to see what you're doing, man. It's really cool. So before we really dive into some of the stuff, you are the CEO of Pure Sweat, in an MBA strategic skills coach and consultant. You work with all sorts of NBA players. I won't name drop on here, but people can check out your Instagram and you can pretty much see who you work with. But it's amazing to see what you're doing. But if you can, Drew, kind of open it up with what's made you the man you are today. I know that's a really big, wide open question, but kind of like to see what's made you the man you are today.
Yeah, I always tell people that, you're not only a product of all the hard work that you put in, but you're also a product of everything that built you and made you. And if I look at kind of the things that have allowed me to achieve whatever level of success that I've been able to have right now, it really starts way back when. The other day I was driving to workouts and I saw a little lemonade stand. And my girlfriend was in the passenger side, and I whipped a quick right turn into like a parking spot. And she was like, "Is everything okay?" And I was like, "I literally have a rule. I cannot drive past a lemonade stand just because, I remember myself, making sure that I had a lemonade stand when I was younger, and I cut grass when I was younger, and I shoveled snow when I was younger. Growing up in St. Louis, you get, all the seasons. So that means you get all the little
Yeah.
businesses as a youngster. So,
When you may cut grass and shovel snow in like a 48-hour period too,
yeah, I know, right? So, there's so many moments like that just snap me back to kind of the grind that I had when I was younger. Even now I'm in the process of publishing my first self-help book. And it takes me back to my first ever self-published book that I did when I was in high school and sold them out of my backpack and the trunk of my car.
Wow.
And then even just, the work that I put in with my players, Bradley Beal was the first ever basketball player that I ever started working with. And I started working with him when he was 13. I was 17. So I was still in high school. I didn't
Wow.
know how to be a basketball trainer at that time, but I did know how to put in a lot of hard work. I knew, consistent work, plus, the right work led to good results. And so all I did was I just put him through consistent hard work that was targeting the areas of focus that he needed to focus on. And that led to him, finding success as well. So I think that, all the things that I'm experiencing now, were really just things that I learned that worked along the way, or me avoiding things that didn't work along the way. And, it's fun to kind of reminisce on those times and realize where you picked up a lot of the strategies that now you deem so, dominant in kind of the practices that I do on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, what I love too is, so you played basketball at Belmont, right, in college, and had a good career there, and then decided to get, I assume, right into the coaching with NBA players. Is that how that went down?
Even earlier. So, Brad Beal I started with when he was a freshman in high school. I was a junior going into senior year in high school. So
Okay.
that was what kind of started it all. Then I wrote a basketball drill book, self-published it at Kinko's. I went to FedEx Kinko's,
That's
lied to
amazing.
them. I was like, "Hey, I'm doing a school project. I need, 200 copies." They gave me a discount for it. That's how I was able to negotiate down like the price to $5 a book. I went around town and I sold all those copies, sold out right away. And so then I was like, all right, hey, school project, I made a mistake. I got to reprint the 200, and I kept doing it. And then eventually after like 1,000 books, they were like, "Hey, listen, we know this isn't for a school project, but we love that you're hustling and bustling. Like, what is this?" And I told them, I said, listen, I'm a basketball player, and a lot of other players want to know what drills and skills I use on a daily basis to improve my own game. And so what I've done is I put together, this book that allows young players to follow the exact same drills and skills that I do. But I end up selling 5,000 copies that summer. So you think,
Wow.
as a gonna be senior in high school, you sell 5,000 copies, making $20 a book. You do the math real quickly. You find out, hey, this is a profession that I can actually make some
This
money in. And
works.
then, I started doing weekly academies. I had 96 kids that were paying me a monthly subscription to be a part of my academies, where they got to come in twice a week. And so early on, I was like, this is what I'm doing. And then my big break outside of, training Brad, who ended up becoming, a multiple time All-Star in the NBA, was David Lee, another NBA who was born and raised in St. Louis. He went to the same high school that Brad did, and he finally gave me a shot my sophomore year in college. He was like in town,
Wow.
in St. Louis, and my AAU coach was his AAU coach, and so he was like, "Hey, you should really give this young kid Drew a chance." And he was like, "I'm not working with a college basketball player. What are you talking about? Like, I'm in the,
Right.
in the NBA, And I remember him texting me, and I was in Nashville at the time at Belmont, and he was like, "Hey, bro," he's like, "It's D Lee. I'm in town. I'd love to put some work in with you. When can you go?" And I was like, "Anytime. When do you want to start up?" And he was like, "Tomorrow, 8 a.m." And I remember, finishing up a couple workouts I had in Nashville, getting in my car, driving to St. Louis, getting back at like midnight that night. I spent from midnight till 7 a.m. studying film of David Lee so I could really understand the ins and outs of his game. Got to the gym at like 7:15 because I wanted to mop the whole floor, because I was like, NBA guys are not used to the floors that
Right.
used to working out these kids on, which are just like gyms with no AC. The water fountain was like hanging by the last string, and that's what I did. But one workout turned into me being his full-time trainer for the rest of his career, and that really expedited the process of me being a professional skills coach at the highest level.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I think is, again, fascinating as well. When I, follow you on Instagram and I see the guys you're working with, they all look like they're, 7 foot tall. And so what have you done? Obviously the work and things you just mentioned, but for the world's best athletes in the NBA to be humble enough to listen to this guy, that, to your point, high school, Belmont, and now doing this, how do they stay humble enough to listen to you?
Well, I heard the best quote was actually from David Lee, who, like I said, was my first NBA client. And I remember we were sitting down and we were at Cheesecake Factory in Phoenix. And it was the night before they were getting ready to open up the season against the Suns when he was playing for the Warriors. And Steph Curry had made a comment, about something. And David was like, "Hey," he's like, "Steph, are you going to go to Seth, his little brother at the time was playing at Duke? Are you going to go to his opening night game?" And he was like, "I don't know why." And he was like, "Because Drew plays against him." And Steph was like, "Man," he's like, "Drew, I didn't know you coached college ball too." And he goes, No, he plays college." And he's like, wait, what?" And he's like, "Drew plays at Belmont. Belmont opens up the season at Duke. So Drew is going to be
Wow.
opening up guarding Seth." And Steph was like blown away. And I remember him asking David, he's like, "All right, I got to ask a question. Like, how did you eventually trust this college kid that is playing at a mid-major and, averaging 10 points a game? And like, what are you doing listening to this guy?"
Right.
And Dave said a great quote that best kind of answers your question. He said, "Phil Jackson couldn't beat Michael Jordan or Shaq or Kobe in one-on-one, but Phil Jackson could make Kobe and Michael and Shaq better versions of himself." And he said, "Drew's not a better basketball player than me, but Drew can make me a better version of myself. And that's why I hired him." And so I think
Yeah.
that best describes it is, I'm humble enough to know that I'm a small part of these guys' games. My job is to make their workouts as strategic as possible. My job is to make sure that I'm spotting things on film that they can't feel themselves when they're out there on the game. My job is to basically do all the dirty work so that all they have to do is put in the right work so that they can get the right results and get the best results possible. I also know that I'm leveling them up just a little bit, but that little bit is the difference between them being a all-star and them being an MVP, or them being a starter and them being an all-star, or them being a role player and them being a star. So, I always say I'm like a GPS system. They get in the car, they're the one doing the driving, but at the end of the day, they're saying, "Hey, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to be. Help me get there in the most efficient and effective way possible." And then it's also my job not only to put together that roadmap, but also if they get off course, to get them back on and reroute them back onto the track that they need to be on so they can eventually get to where they want to become. And sometimes we even get past where they want to become and get to really special things in their career that they never thought were possible.
Yeah, that's a great explanation, and it makes me think, tying the basketball world to the business world. I've had an executive business coach for years, right? So it's like Does that mean they're a better business guy than me, right? Using air quotes, or maybe not. I don't know. But the point is they can see things in me that I can't see myself. You look at you can't see it. Michael Phelps back here. He had a coach, right? Could that guy beat him in swimming? Nope. But to your point, right? It's amazing. I like the GPS thing. So, what clearly there's the physical side of that, but what else are you seeing from a mental side? Because the mental game up here is super important as well.
Yeah, I always talk about the games that you play in your head and your heart that maybe you don't even know you're playing. And you got to win those games in order to, win the games that take place on the court. And, I think that most of professional athletes don't realize that they're not as good at compartmentalizing things as they think they are. A lot of times slumps on the court actually start off the court. And a lot of times, when life doesn't feel great off the court, it's because their on court play isn't great. So they're so intertwined and deeply connected that I think that if a trainer only focuses on the player and not the person, they're doing that player and person such a disjustice. And so,
Yeah.
from an early age, I've realized that, not only do you have to be able to do the skills, but you have to have the confidence to be able to do the skills in games. And then you have to have kind of the awareness to understand that everything off the court can bleed onto the court. And so you have to make sure that you're completely taking care of them as both a person and player, and person comes first. It's
Yeah.
funny because you talked about you having a business coach. I'm a business coach for so many businessmen that make way more money than me, multiple billionaire clients. And I always ask them, because they always hire me, they're like, hey, I want you to be my business coach. And the
Hmm.
first question I always ask them is, I'm like, why would you hire me as a business coach when you're better at business than I am? And they kind of
Hmm.
freeze. And then I go, tell me what's really going on. And that's when normally I realize they're really hiring me as a life coach. They just don't want to put that
Right.
tag on it because there's some kind of stigma behind it. But it's so true. I mean, really, the ultimate goal of professional, sports, ultimate goal of business, ultimate goal of anything is to find peace in your real world, which is your life, not, the little micro world, which is the sport or business that you're, competing and playing in. And so I think the mental side of it is so important. I'm constantly pushing guys to levels that most people feel uncomfortable with, and I always tell them, hey, the direct number of uncomfortable conversations that you have with yourself or with me, because sometimes I have to nudge them, is going to be kind of a direct proportion of how much success you have in your career. And I think most
Yeah.
people don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations. Most people don't want to have those, kind of heart to hearts with themselves. Most people don't want to look in the mirror and say, you know what, he's right, or I know that I'm right
Yeah.
deep down. But those conversations, those kind of self checks, those kind of digging deep moments, those are the exact moments that propel people to special, special things that most people just aren't able to get to because they aren't willing to have those, uncomfortable
Yep.
times that go with those uncomfortable conversations.
So what are you finding? Let's stay there for a minute. The billionaire, the business guy, the basketball guy. What are maybe one or two, three things that you can share with our listeners now of, hey, if you could just implement this one thing into your life, right? Maybe they don't have the means or whatever to hire you or somebody else. So what's one or two or three things that you could help with that?
I would say, number one would be doing a self audit. And when I say a self audit, I mean literally getting into the trenches and asking yourself, what are the stupid things that I'm doing daily that are causing stress and struggles in my life? And like kind of like the keep, chuck, change, add kind of model.
Hmm.
What are the things I need to keep doing that are working? What are the things that I need to
Yep.
chuck and get rid of that aren't working? What are the things I could kind of tweak and change that'll really, change the course of, my daily actions? And what are the things that I'm not doing that I should start doing? But keep, chuck, change, add. That would be one thing that I would say would be something very, very good for most people to do, that deep audit. Number two is, I always say this, like, think about this. Let's say somebody that you love, whether it's, your partner, whether it's your kid, whether it's somebody that you love, a really close friend. If they say, hey, we need to talk, your heart drops, your stomach drops. Like
Right.
everything is like, we need to talk. Like, what's going on? Well, I always say you should have that conversation with yourself before somebody else does. So
Mm.
if you have some kind of issue, if you're struggling with your weight, if you're struggling with drinking, if you're struggling with stress, if you're not spending enough time with your family, if your financial situation isn't where you want it to be, whatever the main cause is, that's kind of one kind of thing that's overflowing life that's causing all the disturbance. You need to have that we need to talk conversation with yourself before somebody else
Yep.
has to have that conversation with you. So the
Yeah.
second thing I would say is just figuring out what the main problem is and being able to actually address that main problem. And then the third thing that I think, if I had to boil it down to three, is consistency. And I think that consistency is where a lot of people slack off. I always say that consistency trumps intensity. And I think that both are great. If you can consistently be intense and intense in the right ways, that is awesome. But, you see New Year's resolutions all the time where, January
Yeah.
1st, you're, all right, here we go. I'm going to the gym. You're posting about it. You're tweeting about it. January 4th, you're like, woo, it's a brutal, day, but I got after it today. I'm proud of myself. And then January 12th, the gym's empty. Everybody
Right.
stopped going.
Right.
And so I think that there's so many areas. Think about diets. How many times have people started a diet on Monday and
Yeah.
Friday comes around and their friends invite them to some fancy restaurant and there's the bread there is just the best bread. And they're going, you know what? One piece of bread won't kill me. And then after that one piece of bread, well, I already cheated. I might as well enjoy my meal. And then that becomes you know what? I'm just going to have a great weekend and I'll start my diet over on Monday. And it's like, we know you're not starting your diet over on Monday. If you do, then on next Thursday or Friday, you're going to break it again. So I would say the first thing is, making sure that, they do that audit, kind of figure out what things they should keep doing, what things they should change that they're doing, what things they should add, and what things they should chuck. Second thing, like I said, have those, hey, we need to talk conversations, those deep conversations, those uncomfortable conversations. Everybody knows the thing that they don't want other people to discover about them deep down. And you've got to discover those things about yourself before
Mm.
other people do. And then the last thing is, consistency trumps intensity, and I'm big on 100% is easier than 95%, which means, for me, I'm 33 years old. I've never tasted alcohol. I've never done drugs. I've never smoked, never done any of that. It's easier for me when I go to a nightclub. Somebody that doesn't know me might say, hey, do you want a drink? And I'll be like, no, I'm good. My friends that do know me, they don't even offer me a drink because they know I am not a drinker.
Hmm.
And it's not one of those things where I show up and I'm like, is tonight the night I drink? If 95% of the time you don't drink, then every single time you go out, you're going to get pressured. Your friends are going to be like, hey, come on, just have one drink. Like,
Right.
because they don't think like I'm not a drinker. They think he drinks occasionally. This could be the occasion. And then if you have one drink, it's, hey, come on, you already had one. What's two? Two isn't going
Right.
to get you. And
Yeah.
then eventually it's a scene from, The Hangover where the next morning you wake up, you feel bad. You're like, oh my God, I'm off my streak. But 100% means I don't do this or I do this. For me, I know every morning I'm going to jump in the cold plunge. I know I'm going to jump in the
Yep.
sauna. I know that I'm not going to drink when I go out. I know there's certain things that I do every single day. It's just who I am instead of what I do sometimes.
I love that. I'm just writing a note here real quick to ask you something later. So what makes you different, do you think? There's thousands of people that would love to trade places with you, right? I was talking to my buddy Steve Winghoff last night, and he had some great questions on here, but he's like, how do you stand out versus thousands of other people that want to do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, my simple answer would be that I just get better results. And I think the way that I get better results is by all the things that we talked about earlier, the little things. Right now I have more NBA clients than NBA All-Star clients than any other trainer. And I've been able to help my clients achieve $4 billion in contracts. And I still watch more film than any trainer that's up and coming. I still am doing free workouts for the kids in the parks just because I love helping grow the game of
Mm.
basketball. This weekend I'm going and speaking to the Missouri Coaches Association. I'm speaking to Illinois Coaches Association. I'm running a camp for 5 to 9 year olds so that my nephew can experience his first basketball camp. Those things aren't money makers, but those things are things that I do because I just truly love helping basketball players, coaches, trainers. And so I think that it's just the relentless hard work with also the obsession of doing everything that I can to help my clients get the best results possible. It's weird, but like I feel more than my clients feel sometimes after a bad game. Like a regular
Yeah.
season bad game, my clients can get over because there's 82 games in a season, a regular season bad game. They're like, it was just a bad game. But for me, when they have a bad game, I look at that as, man, I didn't do everything that I could to prepare them for that game. Whether it was in the summertime, I didn't spend enough time on their finishing, so that's why tonight they had a bad finishing. Or, man, was it their angles of attack? Did I not see something on a coverage report beforehand that I should have given them? Or I'm going through all these questions where they might just be like, I just didn't have it tonight. So you have to have that level of obsession. To me, it's funny because the definition of obsession is the narrowing of things that and focus that brings you pleasure. And for me,
Mm.
the things that bring me pleasure is helping other people succeed. Whether that's a businessman that's trying to turn their life around, whether that's somebody that's trying to become financially free, or whether that's a basketball player that's trying to achieve great things, it doesn't matter. But like my obsession is helping people. And so I think that's what makes me stand out is that I'm willing to do anything and everything, whether that's sacrifice sleep, sacrifice time. There was a year, I think 5 or 6 years ago, I spent 22 nights in my own bed. Think about that, 22
Wow.
nights in my own bed, but I'm willing to do that just because, I put other people's success over my success. And I think that's why I've been able to find my own personal
Yeah.
success along the way.
That's amazing. Gosh, that's awesome. So, and another question Steve talked about is the game has changed so much, right? Back in the day, a crossover and a between the legs, behind the back was a big deal. Then you got the Euro step, the step back jump shot, all these different things now. Like, where do you see the game going, and how do you stay a student of the game?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's fun for me because, I remember growing up and my birthday present was one ticket to an NBA game. And my Christmas present was a flight
Hmm.
to that NBA game. And I remember, how excited I got. I remember also like when I used to get like the new shoes, like I'd get Tracy McGrady or Gary Payton
Yeah.
shoes. And it would be like, you kept the box in your backpack so that the shoes never got scuffed. Like, I remember all those moments. And now I'm on the other side of things where, I get to help the best players in the world. And I honestly get to help pivot the game forward. There's a couple of moves that I've invented, if you will, or created, or kind of us on the court kind of brainstormed that now are
Wow.
staples to young players' games. And so I would say that the game is ever flowing, the game is ever changing. For me, I'm watching so much film that if I see a mistake happen, like say, there was one time in transition that I saw Manu Ginobili do something, and he literally stumbled, but the defender reacted a certain way. And I said, "Whoa, why did the defender react that way? If you cross the ball one way and you jab or slide the opposite way, does the defender go with the ball or go with you?" And I'm like, "Well, either way, you win because if the defender goes with you, now your momentum is loading and exploding, whereas their momentum is sliding and recovering. Whereas if they don't go with you, it's a quick counter, a crossover, and it changes." And I remember seeing that one mistake where he ended up getting fouled and getting, tripped up and then ends up on the floor and shooting free throws. And I turned it into a one-on-one move. This is like a decade ago. And now it's become a pattern. So to me, it's just trial and error. You try a bunch of things out, and the things that are working, you keep trying to refine them until they work better. And then when they work better, you keep trying to refine them until they work, as best they can.
Yeah.
And the things that don't work, you just chuck them. You get rid of them and say, okay, you know what? We tried it. It doesn't work. It's even to the stuff where you look like right now, 3 pointers are so heavily valued in the NBA that, with some of my clients, we started the sidestep, pulls and all these kind of different sidestep threes and different threes to, ways to get inside the 3 point line and get back outside the 3 point line. And then you go, all right, should we start shooting floater threes, like runner threes off of 1 foot? And it takes somebody to try it out and say, okay, now we chart the numbers. Does it make sense? Is that a good shot or not a good shot? But
Yeah.
there's a ton of things that we try on an experimental basis that never see the light of day. And there's also things we try that we don't think will see the light of day, and then they use it in a game randomly
It
because it's
worked.
somewhere in their, in their bag of tricks. And then we say, okay, maybe we were wrong. Maybe that does work. And then we kind of, start to kind of reprogram it. So where are the trends going? I don't know. It's just a constant, nonstop thing. I do see obviously the analytics have taken control of the game, which means defensively they're going to start taking away what the offense is trying to get, which is going to open it back up to kind of the older school modern game where more mid-range shots and more mid-post actions or stuff are made. But game's constantly evolving, which is fun for me just because it keeps that challenge on the board where you constantly have to make sure that you're not falling behind and you are preparing your clients for anything and everything they could be experiencing
Yeah.
when they're out there on the court.
So, what do you see the biggest difference between the best versus the average? And I would say the average in the NBA, right? There's still some of the best, but like in golf, I look at it as number one and versus like number 150 on the PGA Tour. They're like, one stroke different. That's one putt, right? That's 1 4-foot putt. What are you seeing as that quote unquote 4-foot putt in the NBA? Like what makes them different?
Confidence, because there's different reasons why the best players are the best. You look at let's start in the MVP conversation and go down. So like Joel Embiid, one of my clients, what makes him the best is skill, dominance on both ends of the floor. But
Yeah.
again, there's other players, there's other big guys, maybe that can't do it as well as he can, but they can still do the same moves and drills and skills as he can 1-on-0, but they don't have the confidence to be able to do it against defenders in games, against double teams and different coverages and schemes. Then you look at somebody like a Jokic, who's just unbelievably gifted as a creator, a passer, great touch, great feel, his IQ. Well, there's a lot of players that are very smart, that are very skilled, that have the ability to make good passes and make good reads, but they don't have the ability to whip those cross-court passes in a
Yeah.
tight space. They don't have the ability to take the extra dribble to get a little bit closer to the basket. They don't have the ability to do these things when they're guarded. You look at somebody like Giannis. Giannis has obviously been so dominant, 2 MVPs, a Finals MVP, a Defense Player of the Year, all these kind of things. Giannis has unbelievable like will to just compete. Like he's not an elite shooter. He doesn't have elite footwork. He doesn't have elite ball handling. He doesn't have elite post moves. What he does have elite is his ability to compete. He's worked extremely hard to turn himself into the athlete that he is today with strength and physicality. You see how he's grown. But there's a lot of players that play hard, but they don't have the ability to do what he does because,
Yeah.
he just has that extra level. So when you go down the line, each guy has a different thing that they're good at or great at, but really it's just they've been able to turn it on because you also see players when they change roles, like a Mikal Bridges, for instance. Mikal Bridges was on the Phoenix Suns and was a really good role player. But then when he got to the Brooklyn Nets and he had better opportunity, that confidence changed. It wasn't like he had, in 3 days span that he
Yeah, he
changed
got
teams, that
better.
he went to the gym and got so much better. It was that one, his opportunity changed, and two, his confidence in that new opportunity changed. And so I think that's what really helps, the best of the best stand out is they have the ability to do it. If you think about businessmen, same thing. How many times do people have great ideas? Like they're watching Shark Tank and they're like, I
Yeah.
thought of that. But it's like, did you actually do anything to try to make that thing a reality? No, but somebody else had the confidence to go out there and try to build what you thought of. And that's why they're a millionaire or a billionaire. And that's why you're watching their episode on Shark
Yeah.
Tank. So
Yeah.
I think that that's the biggest thing in life is just confidence. Having thoughts and having ideas is one thing, but having the confidence to act on those ideas and then having the confidence and kind of persistence to be able to get past the moments of doubt that are going to be in your way at some point along the lines. That's what makes the best of the best.
Yeah, great answer. Great answer. So you mentioned, I know we got to go here in a little couple minutes, but you mentioned sauna, cold plunge. What other advice would you have for business leaders? That I'm not an NBA player, so I got to treat my body, but I still want to treat my body well, right? So what are you recommending people do daily to take care of themselves to be at peak performance?
Number one, keep the peace, which means eliminate everything that is not peaceful in your life. And I mean that, that's
Yeah.
the easiest way for somebody to feel great. I think that there's too many people chasing things instead of, eliminating things that would actually help them more than the chasing. I always think of like this, this video that I saw, and it was a long time ago. And it was one of these like self-help motivation kind of things. And there was somebody and they had a ton of weight on their back and they're trying to sprint and they're not going very fast and they're trying to sprint and they're not going very fast and somebody just comes over and helps them take off the backpack of weight and now they start sprinting and it was like, hey dude, listen, you can either try to run harder or you can just take off the extra weight and now you're going to be moving a lot faster. And I think that'd be the number one thing I'd say is when I look at everybody from the top athletes in the world, the top business people in the world, they've been able to manage stress and eliminate stress and delegate stress better than anybody else.
Yep,
That's the number one thing
for
that I would
sure.
say. Second thing that I would say is, what you eat is so important. And I think that the easiest way, there's not a special diet. It's just, the foods that make you feel good, eat more of that. And the foods that make you feel bad, eat less
Right.
of that, And then the last thing would just be exercise. Obviously, there's so many different, studies out there that show you that, if you have somebody that's fat, that doesn't, that does exercise, and somebody that's skinny that doesn't exercise, the fat person actually that exercises is actually more healthy in most cases, as long as you're not super overweight. Ideally, you're exercising and you're not overweight, so that you're really winning. But there's even things that, like, I helped my dad lose 90 pounds in a calendar year, just
Wow.
doing little things. It was eat half of your meal and then save the half for later. And you realize, okay, your portion size sucks. And then, okay, every
Yeah.
time you're hungry, drink water before you eat. And you realize a lot of times you're thirsty when you think you're hungry. And then it was get outside. Hey, put your shoes on, start walking around the block. If you go just a lap around the street, that's okay. If you're feeling bad, just get back home, but at least you walked. If you're feeling good, then go walk for an hour. Those were the three things that we did to start out. And it lost 90 pounds just because what happens is you get in the habit of eating well. You get in the habit of eating smaller portions. You get in the habit of, getting out of the house every single day instead of just the days you feel like it. But I mean, there's a million things they can do. I think that the problem is when people try to they try to like start this new program, it's too much. And then the intensity is there, but not the consistency that we talked about earlier. I would say do little things. Like I always say, starter steps. Like, what is the
Yep.
smallest action that you're willing to take and that you're going to do even on the days that you don't feel like doing them? Do those, build up the habits, and then grow those habits until they become things that actually benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, I love that. That's so simple, right? But yet it's so powerful because I think some people like, all right, I haven't worked out in months, but now I'm going to work out 6 times this week. It's like, well, dude, that you haven't done it at all. So you really think you're going to work out 6 times this week? It's kind of crazy. So last question for you: future greater than your past. You can see the sticker here, having a future greater than your past. When you hear those words, that's what our mission is to help people achieve: is a future greater than their past. What's that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, honestly, I always think back of, how I grew up and I saw my parents make so many sacrifices for me. I remember when I was 16 years old and the day before my 16th birthday, I remember my mom coming in the house and my mom pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, Drew, just so you know, tomorrow on your 16th birthday, you're getting a car." And I like started
Hmm.
smiling. She goes, "Now, the reason I'm telling you early is because it's not the car that any of your friends have. It's not the car that you probably want. It is a car that has 180,000 miles. It has a huge dent in the driver's side door. It squeaks a little bit. The tires squeak a little bit, the brakes squeak a little bit, but it's going to get you point A to B. But the reason I'm telling you today is because tomorrow morning, when you walk outside, I want you to be happy as you can be. I don't want your dad to be like sad that you weren't appreciative of the car." Now, what she didn't know is I was so happy just to have a car because it meant I got to get to the gym and back, got to get to my
Right.
workouts and back, whatever. But that, to me, my past, I never realized we were not as well off when I was younger because when I got Abercrombie and Fitch stuff, it might have been a hand me down, or it might have been from a reuse it shop, or it might have been from a garage sale. But my parents did everything that they could to make sure that we still had all the things that we needed to have or wanted to have. If we wanted to play sports, they made sure that we were on the teams that we wanted to play for. If we wanted to travel, they would, I remember my mom, literally cleaning houses, just so that my sisters could go to St. Joseph's Academy, which was a private school that had
Oh
good,
yeah.
sports teams and academics. And she did that so that they could afford going there. But I just think about that when I think about my past. And so when I think about future being greater, I always think about, man, at some point in every family's history, there's somebody that changes the course of their entire family. And I want to be that person, and I really do think that that's the one special bond that my clients and I share. A lot of them come from the same backgrounds that I came from. And we get to be the person that changes that. Like that, our families aren't going to have to struggle or stress over
Yeah.
financial concerns anymore. Our families are going to get, my nieces and nephews, when they get to go to basketball games, they get to be on the court before the games. And they get to meet their favorite
Right.
players. They get to, FaceTime with, it's their birthday and Jason Tatum's their favorite player. I'm FaceTiming them with them. I didn't get to do those things, but they do,
Right.
because, their future is going to be better than, all of our collective past. So, when you said that, that's what it brought me back to, is just, I've seen all the sacrifices that my parents made to make sure that we had such a blessed life. And I also realized that, there are tons of people out there that pray for our worst days. And so keeping for that perspective in mind, I'm going, man, how can I help as many people as possible experience the exact same thing that I'm experiencing, which is this, feeling of, almost appreciation and gratitude to be able to do something that I love each and every day when I wake up.
Well, Drew Hanlen, you are the freaking man. I know you got to get going. Hang with me when I hit record or finish recording here. But, man, awesome freaking information. And thanks so much for being on the Circuit of Success.
Awesome. Appreciate you having me.